Developing right now on Morning News Now. Fear and frustration over that Israeli strike targeting Hamas leadership in Qatar. This morning, President Trump condemning the attack that leaves ceasefire talks in Doha in limbo as concern grows for the Israeli hostages still in captivity in Gaza.
And I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down.
A lot developing overnight. We're going to bring you an update from the Middle East to Washington. Also, President Trump speaking out about that lewd birthday note allegedly written by him for convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Meanwhile, Fed Governor Lisa Cook still on the job after a judge blocks the president from firing her for now. And new jobs numbers casting doubt on the strength of America's economy. We're going to bring you the very latest. Plus some not-so-sweet news for millions of people all over the world. A new study shows that nearly half of folks with diabetes don't even know they have the disease. What doctors want you to know. An Apple of my AI phone. We'll get a look at Apple's latest and greatest tech just unveiled and how new artificial intelligence features could set it apart from the competition. Good morning. I'm Sam Brock, in for Joe in Savannah this morning. We begin, of course, with rising tension in the Middle East, now reaching Washington. President Trump slamming U.S. ally Israel, a rare rebuke for carrying out a deadly strike against senior Hamas leaders stationed in Qatar's capital yesterday. The group was considering a U.S. ceasefire proposal to end the war in Gaza. It's been going on for months. Loud explosions were heard in the city of Doha as smoke rose over a residential area that is also home to a number of foreign embassies. The unprecedented attack sparking rare public criticism of Israel from the Trump administration and putting those hostage negotiations at risk.
I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal.
All right, this comes after Israel ordered a total evacuation of Gaza City yesterday as it moves forward with a full-scale ground invasion. The fate of around 20 Israeli hostages still believed to be alive and some 2 million Palestinians hanging in the balance. NBC's Alice Barr joining us now with the very latest. Alice, good morning.
Sam, good morning. The White House says the U.S. military, not Israel, notified it of the Israeli strike and that the U.S. then told Qatar, but not in time to stop the attack. President Trump overnight voicing frustration with another escalation in the Middle East, an Israeli attack targeting Hamas leadership inside Qatar, that Qatar called cowardly and illegal.
I was very unhappy about it, very unhappy about every aspect, and we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
The president saying Israel did not warn him in advance. On social media, the president writing, quote, unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. Hamas leaders were in Qatar because the U.S. asked for a neutral site for Gaza peace negotiations that Qatar has been mediating for months. Those talks now in limbo, devastating Israeli hostage families. One mother saying she's trembling with fear for her son, still captive in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu authorized the strike after a shooting at a bus stop in Jerusalem Monday that killed 6 Israelis.
These are the same terrorists who planned, terrorist chiefs who planned, launched, and celebrated the horrific massacres of October 7th.
Israeli forces are once again stepping up military operations in Gaza, forcing beleaguered Gaza City residents to evacuate as President Trump and other world leaders push for a path to peace. The U.S. is pushing a new ceasefire proposal that Israel agreed to and Hamas was reviewing, though voicing skepticism about the terms. The White House says President Trump has now spoken to Israel's prime minister and assured Qatar's top leaders a similar strike will not happen again as we wait to see the fate of negotiations. Sam?
Alice Barr starting us off this morning. Thank you so much from Washington. Meantime, as the White House is contending with a crisis clearly in the Middle East, President Trump is attempting to distance himself from the evolving Jeffrey Epstein scandal. The president continues to deny that he wrote a sexually suggestive letter to the convicted sex offender more than 2 decades ago as part of a book compiled for Epstein's 50th birthday. That book was part of several documents released by Democrats Monday on the GOP-led House Oversight Committee. The president addressing the scandal last night to reporters outside of a restaurant in D.C. Take a listen.
It's not my signature, and it's not the way I speak. And anybody that's covered me for a long time knows that's not my language. It's nonsense. And frankly, you're wasting your time.
All right, he says it's not his signature. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joining us now from Washington with the very latest. Monica, great to see you. Thanks for being here. The White House continuing now to play defense when it comes to the Epstein scandal. That's nothing new. But during a brief phone call yesterday with NBC News, President Trump did call the investigation a, quote, dead issue. But the questions and the demands for the release of these documents obviously are not going to stop. So where does that leave things this morning?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Sam. This is an issue that the White House would prefer not to be talking about. But remember, it's the White House and the president and its allies that have been calling for more transparency, for more records to be released when it comes to the Epstein controversy. And that likely we can see more of that in the coming weeks that will raise more questions about whether the president did indeed sign this. As you're showing on your screen, again, the White House denies that. The president denies that. But it was a few months ago when the story first came out that the White House said the letter was non-existent. Of course, now it has been revealed. And the president has said that maybe somebody signed it for him. But you would have to then assume that that meant that more than 20 years ago, that's something that was done. And the White House has not at all provided an explanation for how that might work. But the president is now being asked specifically to talk about whether he would meet with some of the victims, some of the people who survived Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. Here's how he answered that question when he was out last night.
Will you meet with the Epstein victims? Do you plan to meet with?
I don't know about nobody suggesting that.
But would you be open to doing
certainly,
that?
I don't like that whole situation with respect to anybody being abused or hurt, but I haven't even thought about that.
Now, it is the victims and some of the family members of victims that have raised, again, this idea that their voices should be more included in the entire coverage of this and in this story, and they have been more outspoken. So that is something that the White House now may have to answer for, Sam.
Indeed. And those families have been asking for more transparency as it concerns the release of these documents, too, Monica. So it's now been more than 24 hours since the House Oversight Committee released some of the records related to an Epstein following a subpoena to his estate last month. The president continues to say, again, it wasn't his signature on the card that he allegedly wrote. What else are we learning from the release of these files?
Yeah, and remember, when it comes to his signature specifically, if you look at correspondence that has been released, because remember, Donald Trump, the citizen before he became the politician, was sending so many different letters to so many different people who have at that time released now what it looks like and compared it. And there are many that do seem to match, again, seemingly this signature that's there that the president denies. But the White House is also now actually answering in an interesting way in terms of saying that they are talking about this whole narrative being what they're taking issue with. But yesterday, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt said, we don't believe that the documents necessarily are a hoax. So they're saying perhaps this is something that really did exist. But again, they're arguing that somehow someone else would have written this and attached Donald Trump's name to it. But in terms of what these documents are also raising questions about, Sam, remember that this is something where the president has talked about his fallout, the fact that his relationship broke down with Jeffrey Epstein all those years ago, specifically because he liked young women. That is what Donald Trump has said. And because he specifically hired away some people who worked at Mar-a-Lago. And so there are still questions, again, about what was known exactly at that time, about what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, what Donald Trump knew. And those are the questions that just remain persistent as more information comes to light.
Yeah, no sign of them going away. I want to pivot for a second as well, Monica. Some pretty big news overnight. We learned late last night that a federal judge had temporarily blocked President Trump's efforts to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Can you walk us through that decision and what it actually means moving forward?
It means right now that she can technically stay in her role. And we know that there's an upcoming important meeting of the Fed that it seems, given this court order, she could participate in. But we also know from the White House and from their legal strategy that they will continue to pursue this and appeal this. And then, of course, this could go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And then this could be reversed. But the whole backstory, and to remind everybody here, is that the White House alleges that there is mortgage fraud here and that that would be cause to remove her, to fire her from her position. That is what the president has said. But some of the details about that, Lisa Cook herself and her attorneys have rejected and denied, saying that that is not true, that that is not accurate, and that that is not grounds for her removal. So that is why they did file that lawsuit. But again, the White House says they will continue to pursue this. The timing, Sam, is a question. It depends on how long it could take for a higher court to potentially overrule this or to overturn this. And then again, we're stuck again in this question of whether she can continue this term, of which she still has years remaining.
Yeah, a lot of topics to cover this morning. Monica Alba starting us off. Thank you so much. Well, as the White House continues to deny that President Trump drew that sexually suggestive note to Jeffrey Epstein, we're now hearing directly from his victims. NBC News Now anchor Hallie Jackson speaking one-on-one with Liz Stein hours after the release of the so-called birthday book. Here's a part of their conversation.
What was your reaction when you saw that birthday book, Liz, the images in it?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that the birthday book was produced by the Epstein estate. So it's coming right from the source. And I think that we should all take a close look at some of the messages in there. They were extremely familiar and intimate. And I think that we're looking at a pattern of behavior with Epstein and some of his friends that has been going on for decades. And this birthday book is just more proof of that.
One member of Congress suggested, though, that its release was a, quote, distraction from the work of trying to find justice for the victims. As a survivor yourself, I wonder, do you see it as a distraction, or do you think it could be a helpful tool moving forward?
I think that that all evidence that we can uncover is helpful. And I think that, if anything, this book shows us, like I said, what his personal relationships were like, what the tone was that he had with close friends, and just kind of the general mindset that Epstein and his friends had is really blatant in this birthday book.
You know, I look at the family of Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who also released a statement today, Liz, and I know that you know them, suggesting that this was perhaps a turning point, although it obviously is in so many ways bringing back up the trauma for so many.
I think it's important to validate the fact that we're feeling two things at once right now. This is incredibly traumatizing for us to have this ripped open again, and for us to have to revisit this and see this on the news and in popular culture every day, everywhere we go. But on the flip side of that, I think that we're all encouraged that the estate is finally turning over some documents, because more than our discomfort in reliving this trauma, we want to see justice. And we are willing, as survivors of this crime, to do whatever we have to without putting ourselves in danger, to really get to the bottom of this. And so I think that we are encouraged by anything new that's coming out.
What is your message, Liz, to Americans at this moment here, with the spotlight on the Epstein case, with the release of these documents, with congressional members, including the head of the House Oversight Committee, promising to release more documents and seeking to look into, for example, Epstein financials? I
think that uncovering the financials will give us a lot of information. And I think that we are, as a country, we are perhaps getting swayed because this is being turned into a political issue, and it's not a political issue. This is a crime, and the crime is sex trafficking. And if we had this crime happen in our communities, if we had a crime in our communities that had 1,000 victims, I'm sure everyone would be screaming for justice. And if I can impress anything on the American people, it really is that this has been going on through 5 administrations of all different political persuasions. And this current administration ran on the promise that we were going to find answers. And so to politicize something that is just a crime is really appalling to all of us.
And our thanks to Hallie Jackson for that candid conversation. Democratic lawmakers and a handful of Republicans on Capitol Hill right now are working to gather congressional support that could ultimately force a vote over whether the Justice Department has to release more Epstein files. Well, to the economy now, and a new report that's offering a worrisome glimpse into the overall state of affairs. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of jobs created between April of 2024 and March of this year is now being revised downward by 911,000. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans takes a closer look at what this all means.
31-year-old Fatima Gill is all too aware that the jobs market isn't as strong as many Americans had thought.
There are nights where I just cry myself to sleep.
Gill lives in Cleveland and was laid off from her operations job at a marketing and advertising firm back in March.
I really don't know what to do anymore.
She says she's had dozens of job interviews with no luck.
Did you ever think 6 months later you'd still be looking for a job? All of me, my friends, my family were all surprised that it's been this long at this point. I had a better luck during the pandemic finding a new job than I do now.
Her struggle reflecting signs of slowing in the job market.
This may be the biggest revision ever.
New Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers showing 911,000 fewer jobs were created from April 2024 to March 2025 than previous reports showed. A routine update based on new data showing the growing challenge of getting an accurate picture of the jobs market. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon.
I think the economy's weakening. Whether that is on the way to recession or just weakening, I don't know.
The White House press secretary using the numbers to justify firing the BLS commissioner just last month and to place blame on the previous administration.
This makes it very clear that President Trump inherited a much worse economy by the Biden administration than ever reported.
Fatima Gill more concerned about her unemployment benefits ending in October, now worried she'll have to move back in with her mom.
It is scary. Because it's not in your own control. It's in the control of the economy. What kind of helps me is I'm not alone in the sense of I know other people are experiencing very similar things to what I'm feeling.
The president has been calling for the Federal Reserve Chief Jay Powell to cut interest rates for months now. In fact, the Fed next meets next week, and it could be the Fed is more likely to cut interest rates in light of a weakening labor market. That said, there's more inflation news on the horizon. Inflation data, consumer price index, is due on Thursday. Again, more information for the Fed to consider as it balances whether to support the labor market by cutting interest rates or to keep interest rates steady and not inflame inflation. Back to you.
An important decision coming up. Christine, thank you so much. Well, the Trump administration has unveiled its latest Make America Healthy Again report, billed as a roadmap of sorts to tackling chronic illnesses in kids. This is the second installment, dubbed the Make Our Children Healthy Again strategy report, which is a follow-up of HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s initial assessment that was released back in May. It aims to highlight better nutrition, more exercise, and a review of vaccines and drugs. Public health experts say the plan is long on ideas, in short, on meaningful action. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joining us now to further this conversation. Dr. Azar, good morning. Thank you for being with us. So this is the second installment of this MAHA report, right? So it's intended to build off of the original assessment. First of all, most basically, what's in it?
So I think the report really wants to highlight a couple of different pillars of children's health: food and diet, activity, chronic stress, over-medicalization, and chemical exposures. I think the biggest takeaway from the report is that, sort of how you said in the intro, these ideas all on their face sound great, but the question of exactly how they're going to be implemented, what regulatory actions are going to be taken to achieve those goals, how these goals are going to be financed, was really kind of missing in this report. And I think most importantly, there were a lot of red flags for many public health experts, and myself included, and those include questioning fluoride in drinking water, researching autism, and of course, the biggest one is the vaccine issue. And a lot of this, again, stems from, RFK's confirmation bias that he's going to be bringing to this report. Is he going to get to the end that he wants to see?
Because it goes without saying that access to good information about nutrition and regular exercise for children, I mean, of course, these are important components of a healthy lifestyle for kids. But you're saying there's nothing actionable in there that necessarily jumpstarts that. While the broader conversation around RFK and what he's doing right now at HHS and with the CDC specifically has to do with allowing vaccine science that has been corroborated over the course of generations to continue. And that seems to be in question right now. Is there anything in the report that gets into that aspect of his time?
It does. And I think that again, for us on sort of the front lines and the people who are giving guidance to patients and to parents about vaccinating their children, talking about exploring and building a firmer sort of framework to evaluate what they refer to as vaccine injury. None of us really like that term. We know that vaccines can have side effects, but that kind of language continues to sort of foster this mistrust in vaccines, and also cloaking the conversation about vaccines in terms of medical freedom. To us, that rings again of this idea that this civil liberty and choice around vaccines is going to potentially threaten, as you mentioned, one of the most important frameworks for keeping our children safe, and that is vaccines.
So that framework, how we have this conversation, at least from the government guidance standpoint, is still very much in flux.
Yeah, and I think, again, to talk about the sort of conflict in terms of what they're talking about and what's actually been happening with the administration. If we're talking about access to healthy food, and yet SNAP benefits are being significantly reduced and millions of people are being cut off from Medicaid, how are they going to access those healthy foods? I think that's what's troubling us.
And we were having this conversation earlier, and it may surprise some folks to learn just how many children are dependent right now on access to Medicaid and SNAP benefits, which have been cut. It's a lot of kids, right?
It's a lot of kids. It's about half of the U.S. population of children is actually on Medicaid. So all of those kinds of governmental services are really at risk, and they're in jeopardy. And so, we can all sit here and say that it's important to have healthy food, but if you can't afford it, it's going to fall on deaf ears. Another big one here, Sam, too, was about, chemical exposures, and yet regulation on the EPA. Not what a lot of people wanted to see. So I think we're going to see that a lot of these things are going to be motivated by industry, and that won't surprise any of us.
And the contradictions sort of continue in this report. Dr. Azar, thank you so much, as always. Appreciate it. Well, this morning, Missouri is the latest battleground in the fight for control of Congress. Republicans in the State House of Representatives there voted 90 to 65 yesterday to pass a bill that redraws the congressional maps in their favor. We're again now talking about Missouri. The bill now heads to the state Senate for consideration at a special session later this afternoon. A new map could be on the governor's desk by the end of the week. Now, the plan is backed by President Trump, and it follows a pretty similar controversial playbook from Republicans in Texas last month, you'll recall. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joining us now from Missouri's capital, Jefferson City, with more. Shaq, let's talk about this vote. A handful of key Republicans actually voted against their own party on this. Walk us through what happened at Missouri State House yesterday.
Well, Sam, it was definitely a long day yesterday, and you mentioned there were 13 Republicans who ultimately voted against this legislation, including the Speaker of the Missouri State House, who didn't like the impact that some of the redrawing of lines had on other districts. But in the end, this is a bill that passed fairly easily. Republicans say that these new maps essentially better reflect Missouri's conservative values, and they have the intention of at least adding another Republican to their congressional delegation. Democrats, on the other hand, say that this is essentially a power grab, that this is not something that is usually done in the middle of a decade, and this is essentially Republicans just following the orders, in their words, of President Donald Trump. President Trump, by the way, last night posted on Truth Social congratulating Missouri's lawmakers and saying that he's watching this as this goes to the Senate. He's saying he's watching it very closely.
Shaq, can you sort of break down the framework of this conversation with respect to how Democrats have countered, and specifically in California, right, where they have the most real estate to work with? But I know Governor Newsom has gotten a measure that's going to be on the ballot here, but voters still have to approve it for California lawmakers to be able to move forward with redistricting to counter. So that's going on. And at the same time, now we're talking about Missouri. How does this bill actually change that state's map?
Yeah, you're seeing these redistricting wars that are happening across the country becoming the focal point now here in Missouri. What lawmakers here do is they change the 5th congressional district, which is the Kansas City area. You're seeing it on your map right now. It's held by longtime Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, and they essentially divide Kansas City's voters into 3 other congressional districts, more rural districts, more conservative districts. The point that you hear from Democrats is this is of voters in Missouri's most populous city, and it's having an impact on minority voters, they say, in particular. I want you to listen to my conversation when I brought that point up to the bill's sponsor. One of the points that you hear from opponents is that this essentially dilutes the power of black voters. does it?
Yeah, I think the premise of that's a little insulting to Congressman Cleaver, who's represented that district in a variety of forms, and at points including a lot of rural area, not necessarily at this moment in time, because he does not represent a minority-majority district as it is. And he's represented that district faithfully in Congress. They've continued to elect him, and they might still continue to elect him.
Bottom line here is that both sides acknowledge that this map was drawn with the intention of adding a Republican, sending an additional Republican and one less Democrat to Congress once we get past the 2026 midterm elections.
Yeah, it's pure politics, right? Everyone seems to be pretty much on the same page about that, Shaq. Can we also talk strategy here? When Republicans in Texas introduced their redistricting bill a few weeks ago, Democrats fled the state for weeks to try to delay it. Ultimately, that new map still passed once they returned. So do Democrats in Missouri have anything up their sleeves to try to stop this from moving forward?
Well, Sam, in the House, they were completely restricted from doing that simply because they didn't have enough members to leave the state for in a way that could stop the business from moving forward. But in the Senate, there are different tools that Democrats have. I talked to a state senator right around the time this bill was passing about this. Listen to what she told me.
What I can tell you is that we are going to fight tooth and nail with everything in our rules and our procedures to stop this. I think one of the most important things that we can do is bring other like-minded Republicans with us. We saw in the Missouri House that this did not pass on a party line vote. We are hopeful that we can do the same in the Senate.
You hear them talk about delaying and having a talking filibuster, but I can also tell you there are lots of protests here scheduled for later today, Sam.
Shaq, thank you so much. We'll see what voters think about all this as well. Appreciate that. In other political news, an expected win for Democrats gives the party another seat in a narrowly divided House of Representatives, as we're talking about the congressional maps here. NBC News projects that James Walkingshaw has won the Northern Virginia's deep blue 11th congressional district. That seat had been vacant for months following the death of Congressman Jerry Connolly. That was back in May. Walkingshaw spent a decade as a top aide to Connolly. During his campaign, Walkingshaw leaned into criticism of President Trump's cuts to the federal workforce, and that win leaves Republicans with now just a 6-seat edge in the House. And NBC News can also project that Boston Mayor Michelle Wu and challenger Josh Kraft will be the two to move on to November's mayoral election. They secured the most votes in yesterday's preliminary election. The two candidates with the most votes, irrespective of political party, move ahead to the general election. Wu is aiming to win a second term in City Hall after becoming the first woman and person of color to be elected as Boston's mayor back in 2021. Well, there are new details to get to from the investigation into that deadly condo building collapse in Surfside, Florida, back in 2021 that killed 98 people. Investigators determined that the structural failures that led to the collapse likely started in the building's pool deck rather than in the tower itself. That is according to a report, years-long report here, from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, ultimately released yesterday. The collapse of the 12-story building happened in the middle of the night in June of 2021. Officials say the condo had been experiencing issues in the years leading up to the collapse. The report revealing that faulty construction, structural damage, and corrosion were identified in a prior inspection. At this point, no one has been held responsible. Now, a Dubai-based developer is building a luxury condo complex in its place, with prices starting at $15 million. It is expected to be completed by 2029. Staying in South Florida on a very different topic here. Heavy rain showers expected to continue there today. We've got more details with your Morning News Now weather and meteorologist Angie Lastman joining us with, I guess, an active radar over your shoulder. Good morning, Angie.
Indeed, Sam. Good morning to you. We've got another day where you need the umbrella handy if you live anywhere across really the state of Florida, specifically the southern tier of the state. That's where we're going to see the most active kind of pattern develop as the day goes on. Right now, we're looking pretty good. A couple of these showers, maybe a few thunderstorms working in just north of Fort Myers. Otherwise, everything offshore for now. I say for now because we're going to start to see some of that daytime heating get going, and we've got plenty of moisture to tap into, and we've got this kind of front draped across the state. That's just going to hang around through the day today. So basically, we have all the instability we need to see some of this rain get going. Now, the caveat is we could see some high rainfall rates with this. We saw this same kind of pattern yesterday, so additional rainfall on already saturated grounds. really doesn't take much to see flooding occur across this region. And that's what we're concerned about here as the day goes on. It's not just today, it's tomorrow too. A little bit of movement with that front, but it's going to be a slow mover. We're still going to have plenty of energy to tap into, and the areas of heavy rain are going to be mainly focused over, again, the southern half of the state. So here's what we got for the flash flood risk today. That slight risk really stretching from just south of West Palm, so really Fort Lauderdale area to portions of South Miami. We're going to see those slow-moving storms focused into the afternoon hours, and at times, those rainfall rates anywhere from 1 inch to 2 inches per hour. By the time we get through Friday, because remember, this is going to be multiple days in a row, we could have the potential for multiple inches of rain, up to 3 inches of rain. Again, flash flooding will be a concern, especially on those areas, if you live in this region, the areas that you often see flood in just a single rainstorm. Now, we've got a different kind of flooding concern up and down the East Coast. We've got coastal flooding. So we're kind of sandwiched between a high and a low pressure along the East Coast, and we still have tides a little elevated from Sunday's full moon. That means we've just got really strong onshore winds shoving all that water up against the coast. So we do have a concern for some inundation, about 1 to 2 feet up and down the mid-Atlantic coast and stretching down to the southeast coast, Sam. So flooding for Florida, flooding for the East Coast. We're going to be watching flooding today.
There is a consistent theme, at least.
Indeed.
I will say the fall weather, though, for so many folks has been amazing. If we can just bottle this up and just hold on to that.
My feeling is it never lasts long enough.
No, it doesn't.
Fall and the spring never last long enough.
Pretty much a guarantee.
I'll do what I can.
Thank you, Angie. Appreciate you.
Of course.
Much more to come up here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, new phone? Who this? We'll show you the first new smartphone Apple is adding to its lineup in years, which they say is its thinnest version yet. But first, deadly discovery. What police found in the trunk of a popular TikTok singer's impounded car. Coming up. Welcome back. A foul odor coming from an impounded car in Los Angeles led police to the shocking discovery of a badly decomposing body. That car is registered to the singer David, who's popular on TikTok and currently on tour. A spokesperson for the artist says he's cooperating with the police investigation. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson has the latest from Los Angeles.
Los Angeles police investigating how a badly decomposed body ended up inside the trunk of an impounded Tesla. Chopper video showing detectives on scene at the Hollywood tow lot after receiving a call concerning a foul odor coming from a vehicle.
We were notified by one of our impound lots that there was a suspicious smell coming from the back of one of their recovered cars. After investigators made entry into the car, they found what appears to be the remains of a human being.
Police say the car had been at the lot for a couple of days. When asked about reports the vehicle is registered to 20-year-old singer David, a spokesperson for the singer told NBC News David has been informed about what's happened, and although he is still out on tour, he is fully cooperating with authorities. The artist boasting over 33 million monthly listeners on Spotify, with songs becoming viral hits on TikTok. David has been on tour since the beginning of August, performing shows in Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin this past week. The LAPD saying the vehicle in question had been towed because it was reported abandoned in a wealthy neighborhood nestled in the Hollywood Hills.
It just means that the car had been parked in a place where it doesn't belong for a long period of time. Somebody called and reported it, and our transportation people came out and marked it, and then it was towed as abandoned.
Police say the incident is now being treated as a death investigation, not a homicide, but saying that can always change pending further investigation, adding identification is going to be delayed due to the decomposition of the victim and that the body was found not intact.
We don't know who the victim is yet. We haven't even made a partial identification, let alone a positive identification.
Police remaining tight-lipped about any further details, but saying there is no ongoing threat to the community.
All right, Steve Patterson with that. Thank you. Turning to international news this morning, and Poland is calling an emergency government meeting after it says it shot down Russian drones that entered its airspace. Matt Bodner joining us now with that and more world news in 60 seconds. And Matt, this is significant news, right? It's a first since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022.
That's right, Sam. This is a potential major escalation by the Kremlin coming overnight. These were several large Russian drones entering Polish airspace. Moscow so far has been silent at the top on this matter, but their ally Belarus has attempted to claim it was just an accident. European officials are not so sure, and they're saying that this is a warning, that they're warning this is an attempt by Putin to test NATO's resolve and also potentially to test President Trump's commitment to his allies. Definitely one to keep an eye on. Moving along now to France, President Emmanuel Macron has named a new prime minister. The previous prime minister was forced out yesterday after he attempted to cancel 2 public holidays. Macron's new PM is a close ally, Sébastien Lecornu. For the past 3 years, he's served as Minister of the Armed Forces, and he's been heavily involved in the French response to Russia's war in Ukraine. We'll wrap up this hour in Bolivia, where the national team defeated Brazil 1-0 on Tuesday in South American qualifier for the World Cup. Colombia, meanwhile, defeated Venezuela in its qualifier, and this allows Bolivia to advance to the playoffs, which will then decide who gets the 2 remaining slots for next year's World Cup. Back to you. All
right, Bolivia taking down some soccer titans. Thank you, Matt. Coming up next, back to school season can lead to a lot of mixed emotions for college students returning to campus. We're going to take a closer look at how a certain diet may help them with depression. That story next. And we are back now with our weekly medical checkup. This week, we're looking at a global warning about diabetes and why many people may not be receiving the best care. Plus, how a few text messages might be just as effective as a human coach to get you moving. For more on these health headlines and more, we're going to bring in NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Akshay Syal. Dr. Syal, thank you so much for joining us early from Los Angeles. Let's start with this first study, really, that finds that nearly half of people worldwide living with diabetes don't even know they have it. I guess, how is that possible? That's very disconcerting. And what else did researchers find?
It's really fascinating, Sam. You know that about 44% of people with diabetes don't know they have it. And this is something that, you know, as an internist, I practice here at UCLA, Sam. I'm constantly diagnosing new cases of diabetes in people who don't have symptoms. You know, young adults, you can see on your screen there, are more likely to be underdiagnosed, and only 21% of people are actually having that optimal blood sugar control, meaning that their blood sugar is staying in a healthy range and not too high and not too low. But Sam, why is this a big deal? You know, untreated diabetes can lead to a lot of complications, including more frequent infections. It can be life-threatening if you wind up in something called diabetic ketoacidosis. So this is really, really important. Unfortunately, Sam, the good news I can give you today is that there is something you can do about it. That brings us to our doctor's orders. Make sure you are checking in with somebody like me at least once a year. Diabetes is very easy to diagnose. It is very easy to screen for. And Sam, make sure you know the signs. If you are frequently getting, very hungry, very thirsty, or you're going to the bathroom a lot, those are all big red flags that something might be going on, Sam.
Yeah, Dr. Syal, would simple blood work allow someone to know whether or not they have diabetes? You said it's easy to screen for.
Yeah, it's a blood test called a hemoglobin A1C. Some doctors also do a fasting blood sugar. Very easy to do. It's something we can do at the bedside in our offices today, Sam.
Got it. Dr. Syal, our next study found that a keto diet may actually help reduce depression in some college students. This sounds striking, right? So what's the link between a keto diet and reducing depression?
Yeah, really interesting study out of Ohio State, Sam. They followed about 16 students with depression. They were on medication for depression, and then they had them try the keto diet. And for those who don't know, the keto diet is very heavy in animal fats. It's something that you limit your fruits and vegetables, and your whole grains, of course, you want to stay to that low carb. And what they found, Sam, was that people who tried this diet for about 10 weeks or so saw a 70% reduction in symptoms of depression. It's really, really encouraging, but Sam, it is a small pilot study, about 16 people or so. So not something that we want to get everybody to try out there, but our doctor's orders here, diets are very personalized, Sam. It's something that, if you are, for example, have a lot of heart disease, you may not want to try keto because it's very heavy in saturated fat. And if you, do decide to try it, make sure you do slow and steady. And what that means is, maybe don't cut out all your carbs at once if you're somebody who frequents the Olive Garden every weekend. You want to sort of dial back slowly and slowly until you eventually can try a full-blown keto diet. But just know that, talk to your doctor because it may not be the right diet for you in the long run.
Yeah, I'm guessing those Olive Garden breadsticks aren't part of that diet. Lastly, you may not need that personal coach to get motivated. What more do we know about how a new study shows a text message could help all of us get moving and feeling good?
Right. So this was a study. You know, they essentially had people randomized to get these human coaches versus text messaging coaches, Sam, really with the goal of getting people to move more. And what they found was that they were equal. Both groups walked about 2 hours more per week. You can see improvements in weight, improvements in overall well-being. And why is this exciting, Sam? It's because we have limited resources for humans who can encourage people to get moving. So doctors' orders here, you know, get your friends involved, text each other. Sam, I'm about to send you a text to get off your butt and go get a 2-hour walk in, and make sure you have a realistic goal. You want to always have something in mind that you're striving for and not just aimlessly kind of adding more workout minutes in at the end. Sam.
If you can just find me an extra hour in the day, I would love that as well. Dr. Seil, thank you so much for your insight as always. Well, in other health news, Florida's former Surgeon General, who also served under Governor Ron DeSantis, is now speaking out against the state's decision to ban vaccine mandates. Reporter Justin Shecker from our affiliate WESH in Orlando has the story.
My gut reaction is that's sad, and it's very worrisome, not just for children in Florida, but for the whole state of Florida.
Dr. Scott Rifke served as Florida's Surgeon General during the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Every state in this country, every state, recognized the importance of having children vaccinated in the schools to keep schools a safe place, and let's not go back 100 years.
The Florida Department of Health tells WESH to investigate its already initiated rule changes to get rid of school vaccine requirements for chickenpox, hepatitis B, Hib influenza, and pneumococcal diseases. While those changes will take effect in approximately 90 days, other vaccinations for school children will still be mandatory unless updated through legislation.
But I think it's important for parents and for voters to understand this is not a done deal.
A Florida statute requires public school students to get the vaccines for polio, whooping cough, and measles, mumps, and rubella.
We don't need to do any projections. We handle outbreaks all the time. So there's nothing special that we would need to do.
A recent study by Stanford Medicine found measles cases in the U.S. would skyrocket by more than 11 million in the next 25 years if vaccination rates drop by 10%.
What will this mean in Florida? You know, probably 800,000 new cases, probably 800 deaths, and children who will be injured related to this.
Dr. Rifke says Florida lawmakers should consider that ending vaccine mandates won't just impact public health.
This is going to have an economic impact. This is going to have an educational impact. This is going to have an impact on tourism. So they do the right thing in their heart of hearts, and the right thing to do is continue the practice.
Our thanks there to Justin Shecker from our Orlando affiliate WESH for that report. Coming up next, the billionaire who's closing in on Elon Musk's title of world's richest man. That's next. Stay with us. You're watching Morning News Now. We are back now with the latest product drop from tech giant Apple. Remember the days when this was like a huge deal? Well, yesterday the company unveiled a brand new iPhone, new watches, and new AirPod headphones that have enhanced features, including instant AI language translations. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung was in the middle of the action in Cupertino, California.
Introducing the newest member of the iPhone family.
Apple making the first big new addition to its smartphone lineup in years, the iPhone Air.
This is the iPhone Air. It's what Apple says is their slimmest iPhone yet at just under 6 millimeters in thickness. This is their big bet. It's a new addition to their lineup.
In addition to new iPhone 17s and 17 Pros, Apple also debuting new AirPods Pros that use artificial intelligence.
Live translation begins.
To do live translations.
Definitely. The client will love that.
As well as new smartwatches that can use health data to give you motivational prompts when working out.
That's a new record. You just walked the longest distance in a walking workout this month.
The new products are Apple's new line of defense against competitors, offering phones that flip and fold and boasting bolder artificial intelligence features.
Show me where to start. Unscrew the slip nuts.
As far as the impact of tariffs on prices, it's unclear.
iPhone 17 starts at $799.
The new range of iPhones start at the same price, but its Pro models are now slightly more expensive. The baseline 17 Pro is $100 more than last year's baseline, though it also has more storage. Apple says their new products will hit stores September 19. Brian Chung, NBC News, Cupertino, California.
For more on these new products, I'm joined by NBC News tech contributor Joanna Stern. Joanna, good morning. Great to see you. I'm not going to lie, I am super intrigued by these AirPods that do the language translation. I know we're going to get to that in a second. But let's talk about some of the offerings that Brian was just talking about. We have 2 new iPhones, some new watches, and the AirPods. What are some of the brand new features that people should know about, especially when it concerns the iPhone Air?
Yeah, so there are actually 3 new iPhones, and you're forgiven there because it's very complicated lineup this year. But I would actually say, so yes, the Air is getting a lot of attention. It's very sleek. It's the thinnest iPhone ever. They've done a lot. It's really an engineering feat there. But the big question is are you going to want a thin iPhone or are you going to want a more feature-packed iPhone? And so that's really the question I think it comes down to this year. The Air starts at $999. The iPhone Pros start at basically $1,100. And so it's a pretty minimal gap there. And especially if you add on that extra battery pack to that Air, you're looking at the same price. So you're really making a decision based on features and design.
So consumers effectively are paying for better ergonomics. I mean, it is interesting that Apple is leaning into the thinnest phone they've ever produced versus sort of the deluge of AI features that we're seeing in some of its competitors. On CNBC yesterday, you said you don't think that people are going to be rushing to buy these new iPhones. Why not? And what do you think it will take to get customers excited about the products?
Look, I don't think anyone's rushing to buy new iPhones unless they need a new iPhone. And that's really what I meant in that CNBC clip, right? This is an upgrade cycle at this point. When your iPhone doesn't work or you want a new iPhone, you go get a new one, right? The days of the rapid changes and innovation year after year in smartphones ended a while ago. So yes, there's a smaller group of people that upgrade every year and they will be rushing out to go get this iPhone Air. But if you need a new iPhone and your old iPhone, you just feel like that camera's gone, the battery life doesn't work great anymore, the screen is cracked, the whole thing is falling apart, you're going out and buying a new iPhone and you have a great new selection of choices. I don't want to forget to mention the sort of the lower cost iPhone, which is actually $800 and not actually that low cost, but that's just the regular iPhone 17. And I think it's getting lost here, but that's a very good option for most people. They did a lot of upgrades there, better screen, better cameras, new selfie camera. So I think most people are going to go for that $800 iPhone 17.
It's the more affordable option. And like you said, 3 options, not 2. So thank you for the clarification on that. You talk about the price point here, Joanna. Cell phones are largely exempt from reciprocal tariffs, right? Which were a temporary concern for tech companies like Apple, who do a lot of overseas production. Will customers see a big jump from older versions of products to this new lineup?
Look, I think that's actually the biggest innovation and the biggest feat of Tim Cook yesterday is that they are not raising prices here in a big way at all, if not any way, really, when you look at the lineup, especially when you look at what you're getting in terms of storage pricing versus last year. Yes, they bumped the price of that iPhone Pro up a little bit, but you're still getting the same storage as you were getting on that higher tier last year. So not a huge deal. But look, Tim Cook has been working for months and months and months behind the scenes to make sure he did not have to increase the price of these iPhones.
Joanna, thank you so much. Next time, I'm going to pick your brain on the AirPods and the language translation.
That's the thing I'm the most excited about.
Me too. That makes 2 of us. Thank you, my friend. More financial headlines right now, starting with a new report that shows accessing your money, unfortunately, keeps getting more expensive. CNBC's Silvana Henao joining us with that and other money-making news this morning. Hi, Silvana.
Hey, Sam. Good morning to you. All right, well, ATM fees have hit a record high for the 3rd straight year. A new report from Bankrate finds the average fee for an out-of-network ATM, that rose nearly 2% in the past year to $4.86. The highest average fees, those are in Atlanta and Phoenix and San Diego. The lowest, they're in Boston, Seattle, and Philadelphia. Now, Bankrate says that consumers can most easily avoid fees by banking with institutions that offer a wider ATM network, and a number of online banks and brokerages now reimburse ATM fees. Robinhood is launching its own social network, and it will let users post their trades and track those of public figures, such as, for example, CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Now, posted trades will be verified, and investors can see when the author bought or sold a position. Now, Robinhood will roll out a test version of the platform to roughly 10,000 users early next year. And Larry Ellison is closing in on Elon Musk for the title of the world's richest person. Ellison's fortune soaring by about $70 billion. This was after Oracle reported quarterly earnings and said there's more growth to come in AI. Ellison is Oracle's founder and chairman, and the boost lifting his estimated net worth to $364 billion. That's according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. So that's within striking distance of Musk at $384 billion. Now, if Ellison's gains hold today, it'll be the biggest one-day increase ever for the index, Sam.
All right, richest man watch officially on. Silvana, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Up next, the student making history at a Pennsylvania college because of his age.
I just feel like, okay, I'm in a classroom with people more than double my age.
Or more than that. His story next. You're watching Morning News Now. And finally this hour, move over. Doogie Howser and young Sheldon, a real-life 9-year-old studying neuroscience, has just become the youngest student ever to take a class at your Sinus College. NBC News correspondent Rahima Hallis has his story.
At 9 years old, Aiden Wilkins is making history at a Pennsylvania college.
Every little thing I learn just fascinates me.
And feeling right at home as the youngest student to ever take classes at Ursinus.
I just feel like, okay, I'm in a classroom with people more than double my age.
Okay, because this class in neuroscience is helping Aiden focus on what he wants to be when he grows up.
The reason why I want to be a pediatric neurosurgeon is mainly because, well, I like helping kids around my age.
Since 3, Aiden loved watching anatomy videos.
I was always fascinated when I saw, like, the brain.
Aiden's mom says his genius was evident when he was still in diapers.
He was reading signs and correcting people's sentences, and he was actually correct.
He was promoted to high school at 7, when most kids his age go into the 2nd grade. Now at 9, Aiden is in college 3 days a week and has virtual classes as a sophomore in high school. Part of Aiden's gift is his love of things other kids his age also enjoy.
I mainly like to play video games.
But more than anything, Aiden loves learning.
I'm going to go straight to med school and kind of just see how I do.
One gifted child who may be a gift to all of us. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
Could listen to that kid all day long. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now. And good morning, I'm Sam Brock, in for Joe and Savannah this morning. Right now on Morning News Now, not thrilled. President Trump with some sharp words for Israel, saying he's unhappy with yesterday's military strikes on Hamas's leadership, this time in Qatar, one of the nations pivotal in negotiating a Gaza peace deal. What does that mean, this latest escalation in the context of a wider war? Our Keir Simmons has more in just a moment. Also this morning, the commander-in-chief facing public protests and pushback while out in D.C. as he continues to grapple with the searing fallout from the release of that lewd letter to Jeffrey Epstein, which Mr. Trump denies that he wrote.
It's not my signature, and it's not the way I speak. It's nonsense. And frankly, you're wasting your time.
More on the reignited push in Washington for transparency and justice as the White House works to distance itself from the controversy. Plus, inside HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s plan to make America's youngest generation healthy again. The sweeping new government report aimed at curbing childhood illness and why some critics say it's short on specifics and hard to put into practice. And later in the hour, the nation's failing grade in the classroom, why reading and math scores among high schoolers are now touching record lows, and how we might be able to reverse course in a post-COVID world. But we begin this hour with that growing political backlash over Israel's deadly strike against senior Hamas leaders in Qatar yesterday. The group targeted in the attack was considering a U.S. ceasefire proposal at the time to end the war in Gaza. That, according to a Qatari official. The unprecedented strike by one U.S. ally on another U.S. ally, sparking rare public criticism from President Trump and leaving the hostage negotiations in limbo. Now, Israel says it was retaliation for a shooting that left 6 Israelis dead in Jerusalem on Monday. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons joining us now with the latest from Doha. And Keir, this does appear to have taken the U.S. off guard.
That's right, Simon. This is another international crisis for President Trump to deal with. An Israeli official just in the past few hours saying that Israel does not always act in the United States' interest. President Trump saying that when he learnt about the Israeli attack on Qatar, where I am here, he asked his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, to warn them, but by then, the bombs were already falling on this city.
The explosion that Israel calls a targeted strike, leaving a blackened building this morning, killing 5 Hamas members, but failing to assassinate senior officials, according to the group. The president saying Israel did not tell him in advance.
Well, I'm not thrilled. I was very unhappy about it. Very unhappy about every aspect.
Trump writing that Qatar had been, quote, bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, and that the strike does not advance Israel or America's goals, but adding eliminating Hamas is a worthy goal. Israel's prime minister insisting it was fully justified because he says it targeted senior Hamas leaders responsible for October 7th.
Israel acted wholly independently, and we take full responsibility for this action.
The blast site still surrounded by security this morning. This is the heart of the diplomatic quarter in this capital city. You can see the police have still cordoned off streets. It is visibly a residential area. Global condemnation overnight from across the Middle East and from Europe to Asia, calling it a violation of sovereignty, escalatory and reckless. Qatar calling it cowardly. Its spokesman speaking to NBC News this morning.
Prime Minister Netanyahu not only does not want peace, but he is willing to forego all his responsibilities as an international statesman and act like an individual who is on a rampage, on a personal rampage.
The country has been criticized for hosting Hamas's political wing and praised by US officials for its mediation in negotiations to end the war. Now this brazen strike signals Israel's position, with implications for the Palestinians and Israeli hostages.
And here, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East is in Qatar. So what does this mean in terms of U.S. capabilities and strategy in the region if the relationship with Qatar is in any way materially frayed?
Yeah, the Al Udeim base here, it was targeted, you'll remember, just earlier this year by the Iranians. So this is the second time that Qatar has been targeted from overseas in just a year. And you're right. You wouldn't be surprised if here in Doha they're asking themselves the question, are our security arrangements, our security diplomacy, is that right? Is that really working? I wouldn't suggest that in any way these countries in the Gulf who really want stability are thinking about walking away from the United States at this point. Not at all. But I think they will be asking themselves serious questions. And then, of course, the main question here, how on earth to move forward with a peace process in Gaza? The Qataris, another thing they've done to try and sustain their stability is mediate in different conflicts. The mediation here has really backfired on them, hasn't it, today? And they will be asking themselves questions about that too, I think.
Yeah, with hostage families waiting for some form of closure or answer. Keir Simmons from Doha, thank you so much. Well, President Trump continues to try and distance himself back at home from the scandal involving convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The president again denying that he wrote and signed a sexually suggestive letter to Epstein as part of a book compiled for Epstein's 50th birthday back in 2003. This all comes following the release of the so-called birthday book on Monday by Democrats on the Republican-led House Oversight Committee. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake has been following all this. He joins us now with more on the fallout. Garrett, good morning.
Hey, Sam, good morning. And on an outing to a restaurant not far from the White House last night, meant to show a safer, more welcoming D.C., President Trump was met by protesters and by questions from reporters about that letter to Jeffrey Epstein. The president had told me earlier yesterday he considers the controversy over that letter to be a dead issue. But this morning, it is serving as new fuel for the push to force the release of all of the government's Epstein files. Overnight, while dining out in Washington, D.C., President Trump facing protests.
Free D.C., free Palestine!
And again denying he wrote this lewd letter decades ago for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday.
It's not my signature, and it's not the way I speak. And anybody that's covered me for a long time knows that's not my language. It's nonsense.
Earlier, the president telling me in a phone interview the controversy was a, quote, dead issue. The letter includes this drawing, allegedly by the president's hand, of a naked woman's outline and a scrawled Donald signature below the hips. The drawing included an imagined conversation between Trump and Epstein that ends, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." The White House digging in Tuesday.
Would the White House support a professional handwriting expert review of the document released yesterday to prove that it's not the president's signature?
Sure, we would support that. The president did not write this letter. He did not sign this letter. And that's why the president's external legal team is aggressively pursuing litigation against the Wall Street Journal, and they will continue to.
The New York Times publishing this image comparing the signature on the Epstein letter to 5 other signatures of just Mr. Trump's first name pulled from the New York City mayoral archives. On Capitol Hill, the document's release reigniting efforts to force the release of all of the Department of Justice's files on Epstein.
It's sort of indicative of the things that might come out if we were to release all of the files. In other words, embarrassing but not indictable. And I don't think avoiding embarrassment is a reason to avoid justice.
Donald Trump needs to understand that we will not rest until we get justice and the truth comes out.
One Epstein survivor describing her reaction to the so-called birthday book to NBC's Hallie Jackson.
It really just made me ill when I went through it. It really just solidified to me what the culture of Epstein and his friends were. And it's right there in black and white in this book.
And later today, a bipartisan group of congressional staff will travel to New York City to meet with lawyers from Epstein's estate and to view the unredacted versions of those documents turned over to lawmakers on Monday, according to a source familiar with the plans. That includes the physical bound copy of that birthday book now at the center of all of this controversy. Sam?
Which does apparently exist. Garrett Haake from Washington for us this morning. Thanks, Garrett. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is releasing the second installment now of his Make America Healthy Again agenda, this much-anticipated report focusing on children. Now, it was filled with policy proposals that aim to fix what Kennedy has called, quote, the sickest generation in American history. NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has the details from that report. Ryan, good morning.
Hey, Sam, good morning. And this was a long report. It had 128 different recommendations to help curb childhood illness. And while many health officials agree with the problems raised by Kennedy, there is some question about how much substance there is around those proposals to actually fix them. This morning, new recommendations for children's health care from President Trump's polarizing health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
We're the sickest country in the world.
Kennedy out with a new report discussing key children's health issues, from vaccines to nutrition to screen time for kids, but without clear policy changes.
I think it's great that it emphasized the importance of diet and some of the things that we just don't count, like environmental chemicals. The problem is that there wasn't a lot of substance on exactly how they were going to tackle these third rail issues that are huge.
Kennedy wants to release new dietary guidelines designed to encourage kids to eat healthier and limit the intake of ultra-processed foods and chemical dyes by pushing for bans and taking steps to educate the public more about where they exist. He also wants to get kids more active through education campaigns like the presidential fitness test. The report also repeating Kennedy's critique of fluoride in drinking water. Experts have long said that fluoride is a public health benefit. Kennedy, a vaccine skeptic, is already pushing to revamp how Americans get vaccines. Now the report saying the government will develop policies, quote, ensuring America has the best childhood vaccine schedule and promoting, quote, scientific and medical freedom.
He did hint in the report about vaccine schedule revisions, or at least medical freedom being emphasized, but did not get into any details.
Democrats in Washington, along with some Republicans, have raised concerns about Kennedy's vaccine agenda.
Bottom line, we need an HHS secretary who believes in science, not conspiracy theories.
While the secretary is also in the midst of a shakeup at the Centers for Disease Control, the Senate now planning to hold a hearing next week with Susan Menares, the former director of the CDC who Kennedy fired, and several of her deputies who quit in protest after her removal. And despite this lengthy report, there were other issues connected to children's health that were left out, including food insecurity and gun violence. Kennedy said that he was open to exploring gun violence issues, but said that they were likely the result of mental health issues and violent video games and media, not necessarily access to firearms. Sam?
All right, a lot to unpack there. Ryan Nobles for us in Washington. Thank you so much, Ryan. If you are in the market for a new job, you certainly have plenty of company with you right now, unfortunately. New data is out highlighting a big slowdown in the U.S. economy. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a revision shows more than 900,000 fewer jobs, as you see on your screen there, were created between March 2024 and March of this year. So what does that all mean for you? NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Roman's joining us now with more on what you need to know if you're looking to try to find a job, or certainly if you're looking to buy a new home. Christine, there are mass implications here.
Sure.
Can you walk us through why, first of all, the big change in this revision?
So these are annual updates to the numbers. When we give you that monthly jobs report, you know, Sam, that I report every single month, those are estimates. And what the government does, it sends out essentially questionnaires to companies, and the companies fill them out, and then the government extrapolates how many jobs were added. Except a lot of companies aren't sending those back. And so there's a smaller and smaller pool of companies that are actually helping contribute to this report. So that's one of the problems. There's also been budget cuts at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and fewer basically regional offices that are collecting this information. So, you know, if you don't have all the information coming in, the information that's coming out isn't all that reliable. So that's sort of what's happening.
Okay, so how reliable then are these latest numbers?
So now these are much more reliable because they've used tax receipts and census data. So now the government has a bigger, fuller picture. And it shows a job market that is still, I would call it robust. It's just not that high-flying job market that we thought it was. It was just too good to be true, those initial numbers.
Interesting. So that's how you would characterize the state of the U.S. labor market right now for someone that's graduating college or looking for a new job.
I would call it stable. I would call it stable. Now, if you are just graduating college and you're looking for a new job, we can see there that's where there's the least amount of hiring right now. And you can see why, right, Sam? If you were running a company and you were unsure what your costs were going to be next month or unsure about the landscape, the first people you stop hiring are those entry-level jobs. Yep. So those are tough right now. And I know I've been hearing from a lot of people, it's a little tough right now.
And the tariff uncertainty certainly playing into that
that's exactly
as well. So you're saying basically it's procedural in terms of these revisions. Sure. It's part of the process. You know, President Trump recently was upset with a downward revision in the jobs, fired the BLS chief. I guess I would ask, have we heard from the White House yet on this?
So the White House and the president's allies have suggested that it is somehow these bureaucrats are fudging these numbers to help Democrats. There is no evidence of that. Yesterday, the vice president called BLS numbers now useless. The White House said, look, we can't rely on these numbers. And by the way, if the job market was weaker than we thought, the Fed should already have been cutting interest rates. So there's a lot of kind of politics around it. But I will say this. When you look at these weaker than expected numbers, it does lend more credence to the idea that the Federal Reserve could start cutting interest rates maybe next week.
Which I think might be the biggest takeaway here. Does this add fuel to the fire that it's more likely we're going to see a Fed rate cut?
Yeah, but we have more inflation data this week, too. So here's the push-pull for the Fed. On the one hand, its responsibility is to support the job market. On the other hand, its responsibility is to make sure that inflation doesn't go out of control. And right now, those two things are cross purposes.
They're working in contradiction.
Exactly.
Right
so the Fed has a really tricky line to walk here.
Okay. It always does, and we'll parse every single word, as I know you will. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate you. Well, now to a shipping container accident at the second busiest port in the United States. Dozens of massive shipping containers tumbling over the side of a cargo ship yesterday. This was at the port of Long Beach in California, just south of Los Angeles. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joining us now from Long Beach with more on this bizarre sequence of events. Steve, do we know what caused it? And good morning.
Good morning to you, Sam. Let's start with the good news here. Nobody injured as far as we can tell after those 67 containers slid off of the cargo ship that's still docked behind me. You might be able to see that yellow berm sectioning off that area, leaving behind, obviously, quite a big mess. And authorities are telling us whatever was in those containers likely now destroyed.
This morning, containers normally stacked on a ship, now bobbing at sea.
You'd see the mess that Coast Guard officials are now responding to.
The Port of Long Beach says more than 60 containers fell off a docked ship named the Mississippi, which arrived from China Tuesday morning, some crushing a barge that was connected to the ship. A fireboat used water cannons to keep the containers from drifting away, but some debris could be seen floating in the water.
It was general cargo, clothing, shoes, electronics, furniture, the stuff that we move every day.
It looks to me like there might be like slippers or shoes floating in the water here.
Some containers still on the ship, teetering precariously.
Engine 6 is on scene for several containers leaning on a crane.
Yeah, it's very, very rare. Again, 1 or 2 containers falling overboard may happen occasionally, mishandling, but a whole stack of them in a port, not on the high seas. This is excessively unusual.
The Port of Long Beach is the second busiest port in the country, handling $300 billion of cargo each year. After the accident, the port saying in part, cargo operations have been temporarily suspended at Pier G as operations continued to ensure the safety of dock workers and other port personnel. No injuries were reported, and the incident is now under investigation. So far, it's unclear what caused the containers to tumble off the ship as cleanup gets underway.
You have to gather them as quickly as possible, otherwise you end up with having to literally fish them off the bottom of the port, and that creates some problems.
It is an incredible visual there, Steve. You just talked about the volume of commerce at play here. Any idea how long this could disrupt operations at the port?
Well, what you just mentioned is the good news, right? Because this port is so massive, and really this only happened at one berth of one terminal. There are plenty more terminals for these massive ships to dock at, so likely won't impact operations too much. And the experts are telling us this will all be cleaned up probably within a matter of days or so. Sam?
Steve Patterson with some great context there. Thank you, my friend. The state of Florida, not the Sunshine State right now. It is in for some thunderstorms after a week of wet weather. Let's get a closer look right now with your Morning News Now weather and meteorologist Angie Lastman. Good morning, Angie.
Hi there, Sam. Those pesky showers and thunderstorms sticking around again, as you mentioned, across the state of Florida. Right now, kind of in a bit of a lull. That happens into the overnight and early morning hours, oftentimes for this time of year for this region. But we're going to start to see some of this sparking back up here as we get into the afternoon hours. Here's what's going on. The lay of the land is we've got this kind of stationary front hanging around central Florida. That's going to give us some of that instability that we need. We've got plenty of moisture to tap into. So showers, thunderstorms on the table, not just today, but for the next couple of days. Really through the end of the work week, we're going to still see this kind of repeated rounds of rain that will be possible into the second half of our days. Here's what Thursday afternoon looks like. It's specifically the southern half of Florida that I think will get the higher amounts of rain and that we're more concerned about when it comes to the flooding. But still, I think a widespread area across the state will have that at least marginal risk of flash flooding. Here's today. You can see essentially Fort Lauderdale down to South Miami will have that slight risk for flash flooding. We'll have the potential to see rainfall rates upwards of 2 inches at times. Again, not a lot of places for that water to drain. It's not hard for us to see flooding across this region, so that's what we'll be concerned about later today. Different kind of flooding that we're watching is coastal flooding up and down the East Coast. We've got a high pressure to our north, a low pressure to our south, and basically that's leaving us with those really strong onshore winds. So that shoves all that water up to the coast. Not to mention, we've also got elevated tides after Sunday's full moon. So we're going to keep this coastal flood advisory in effect through the day today, with the potential to see 1 to 2 feet of inundation across these regions, especially if you have areas that are prone to flooding. I would watch those spots through the day today. Big picture look for temperatures. It's a chilly sandwich, or warm sandwich, I suppose, because the warmth is in the middle of the country, right? You see, on the coasts are a little cooler than normal. We've got 70s along the West Coast. Mid-60s in Boston today, mid-80s for Charleston. Not chilly by any means across the middle of the country. Kansas City topping out at 87 degrees today.
All right, so most folks feeling fall weather, but definitely some warmth in the middle.
But it's temperamental. It won't last.
I know. Just have your umbrella if it's raining.
Exactly.
Thank you. Much more to come on this hour of Morning News that includes America's failing grade, why high schoolers across the country are now testing at record low marks, and how we might be able to turn this problem around. But first, after the break, act of aggression. Russian drones reportedly shot down over Poland. The fiery response from officials there and the call to action on Capitol Hill for the White House to step up its sanctions on Moscow. That's next. Well, we're back now with a new escalation in Russia's war with Ukraine. Poland's military says it shot down Russian drones that violated its airspace during an attack on Ukraine. Polish officials are calling it a, quote, act of aggression. Poland, of course, is a NATO member, and now some U.S. lawmakers are urging President Trump to put more sanctions on Russia in response. NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter has the very latest for us. Molly, good morning. Obviously, this is sounding some alarms across Europe and in the United States. It's the first time a NATO country is known to have fired shots in the war between Russia and Ukraine. So walk us through everything that we know this morning about the incident.
Yeah, Sam, that's right. Major potential escalation, I should say, and unprecedented. So not the first time a Russian drone has strayed over the border, over Polish territory, but definitely, as you say, and the Polish prime minister said earlier, the first time that they have shot down a Russian drone over NATO territory in the last 3.5 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, we are still getting kind of some of the actual numbers, and I know the Polish authorities, as well as the NATO members and NATO forces on the ground, are doing a full assessment right now. The Polish prime minister said the first violation of its airspace, Sam, happened at 11:30 p.m. local time. The final one, 6:30 a.m. So a massive overnight attack on Ukraine. The numbers still getting worked out. Poland puts the numbers of Russian drones that crossed that border at 19. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky estimates about 24, but authorities, and again, still looking at kind of exact numbers, believe that Poland and NATO forces deployed air defense systems this morning to shoot down 4 Russian drones over Polish territory.
Wow.
Sam.
It's stunning just to hear you say that. So what is Poland commenting now about the ongoing situation? Have we heard from Russia? Are they acknowledging the drones?
Actually, just in the last couple of minutes, we just got a statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense, and I'm just going to look down at it, reading it almost for the first time, Sam. At the bottom of this kind of paragraph statement, they said there were no targets envisioned for destruction on the Polish territory. The maximum flight range of the Russian drones used in the assault, which allegedly crossed the border with Poland, does not exceed 700 kilometers. Nevertheless, we are ready to hold consultations with the Polish Ministry of Defense on this matter. No response yet from Poland, but Poland was very, very clear overnight that this incursion must be met not only with and defended by NATO member states. Overnight, Polish and NATO air defenses were deployed against these drones. But the Polish Prime Minister, Sam, also said that words are not enough. They would be going to the other member states for additional support, additional resources. That, of course, as you noted, includes the United States.
Right. And then the question becomes, what's our response, right? So this incident, of course, the backdrop so important is after months of negotiations between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin to broker a peace deal in Ukraine. How might this impact those conversations?
Well, it certainly doesn't get them any closer to a ceasefire deal, that's for sure. We have heard President Trump, of course, voice frustration with Russian President Putin after that summit in Alaska with these increased escalated attacks. And we have seen escalated Russian drone attacks on Ukraine in the last several weeks. But an attack like this, a massive attack like this, certainly one that strays over the border into NATO territory, certainly doesn't get anyone closer to any kind of ceasefire. Sam.
No, and the ramifications just immense here. Thank you very much, Molly. Appreciate the report. Staying in Europe now, there are widespread protests and strikes happening across France today. Tens of thousands of people are mobilizing to fight back against President Macron and his agenda, including budget policies, planned welfare cuts, and the high cost of living. Now, it comes hours after Macron named one of his loyalists as France's new prime minister. NBC News international correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian joining us live from Paris with the very latest. Danielle, good morning. We're going to get to the new prime minister in just a moment. But first, let's talk about these demonstrations. We see you out there this morning. They were organized on social media, right? And they are some of the largest street protests that France has seen since 2018 when the Yellow Vest movement began. Tell us about that.
Yeah, good morning, Sam. Good morning from Place de la République here in Paris, one of hundreds of locations across France where people are gathering in protest, as you say, against Emmanuel Macron and his government. This was born online a few months ago when the previous prime minister introduced or announced his austerity plan, which was wildly unpopular. Among the things that he called for was the freezing of pensions, the cancellation of 2 national holidays, which are really sacred here in France. So as anger grew, so did the support, which was born in sort of right-wing circles, but it has exploded. And so now it involves people and unions all across the spectrum, and they are gathered here at Place de la République and elsewhere in the country. There's been pockets of violence, hundreds arrested, but from our vantage point here, it has been somewhat peaceful so far. I have to say that it is decentralized. There is no leader. There is no individual organization or union leading the charge here. So for some people, there is quite a bit of confusion, but they are here. And the common thread, some are calling for the boycott boycott of the banking system. They're calling on people to use cash instead of cards. But the common thread here, Sam, is the anger towards Emmanuel Macron and who they say is the ruling elite, who they say is disconnected from the daily struggles of everyday French men and women.
So decentralized, Danielle, but widespread frustration, as you're describing this morning. Can you tell me also, what do we need to know about France's new Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu?
Yeah, Lecornu, 39 years old, previously the defense minister, seen as a really close ally of Emmanuel Macron. He has been there since day one when Emmanuel Macron became president. He's also seen as someone who could potentially find compromise with the far right and give Emmanuel Macron enough support to push his policies forward. Yesterday, he was saying that he sees the need for more investments in defense spending, something that will not be popular here. People are holding up signs calling for more money for education, for teachers, not for bombs. And so, given the fact that he is so close to the president, it's hard to see how he can deviate from the policies and the vision of Emmanuel Macron, which we know are deeply unpopular.
Right. So he's a loyalist, and this is also France's 5th prime minister in 3 years. What is causing all of this chaos there, and could it force out President Macron before his term actually ends?
Yeah, well, France is a deeply divided country with a deeply unpopular Emmanuel Macron. And yes, he's made headlines around the world for his support, for trying to rally support on Ukraine, for his work on trying to rally support for the Palestinian cause. But a lot of people here will tell you that he's trying to make up on the global scale what he is failing to do here at home. There is a banner here now, well, it's still there. It says, Macron ta guerre. Macron, this is your war. And there are tens of thousands of police officers deployed across the country today. If I just turn around, you will see police are gathered here just on this corner, but at every corner around Place de la République. It is for now a festive atmosphere where I am standing. But Sam, as you know, things can turn quickly.
They most certainly can. Danielle Hamamdjian for us, live from Paris. Thank you so much. Well, more international news now. A Princeton University doctoral student kidnapped overseas has just been freed after more than 900 days. Matt Bodner joins us with that good news and more in 60 seconds. Matt, good morning.
Sam, good morning. Elizabeth Surkov was kidnapped by a militia group in Iraq 2 years ago and been held in Iran for more than 900 days. She is safe now, currently located at the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. President Trump announced her release in a Truth Social post yesterday. Her family thanked Trump for his efforts in a statement given to the Associated Press. Moving along now to right here in London. The city is in chaos this week amid a massive strike by underground train workers. Streets have been packed with traffic, and many people have turned to bikes, buses, and even boats to get around. I assure you this has been brutal. The strike started Sunday and set to run through Friday. We'll wrap up this hour in Romania, where the 68th running of the World Long Distance Gas Balloon Championship is just wrapped up. The race began last Friday, taking off from Metz in France. The winners of the race, a Swiss team, landed in Romania. 3 days later, flew the furthest distance from the launch site. Total distance traveled was 844 miles, and they did that in 2 days and 19 hours. This is the team's 5th win in this race. Back to you.
Kind of looks like fun. Matt, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Up next, are America's high schoolers failing to make the grade? When Morning News Now returns, we are digging into a pretty eye-opening new report showing that reading and math scores across the country are at record lows. But is it all because of the pandemic, or are there other factors at play here? We're going to take a closer look. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And we are back now with a closer look at what's making news in the world of politics this morning, starting with a high-stakes trip to China for a bipartisan group of lawmakers. NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now, who seems to be covering a million stories at all times. Ryan, good morning.
I'm always here for you, Sam. You know that. And let's talk about that group going to China. For the first time since 2019, these American lawmakers will visit the Asian country. This is a bipartisan group of members, and they'll visit the country later this month. Now, the trip, of course, comes at a time of increased tension between China and the United States, as China's leader Xi Jinping is cultivating relationships with the leaders of Russia and North Korea. It was election night in Virginia, and it turned out to be a great night for Democrats. James Walkinshaw won a special election last night in Northern Virginia by close to 50 points to fill the vacant House seat left open by the death of Congressman Jerry Conley. Now, this seat is a deep blue seat, and the results will have an immediate impact. Walkinshaw has promised to sign the discharge petition to force a vote to compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. With the addition of his signature, the sponsors will need just one more member to get the bill to the floor. And the nationwide redistricting battle continues to heat up. Missouri is now one step closer to redrawing their congressional maps with the goal of creating more GOP-friendly seats in the conservative state. A longtime Democrat-held seat based around Kansas City is likely to be carved up. The State House passed the bill yesterday. It will now go to their Senate, where progressive groups are already planning a large rally in opposition to the move. And Sam, that's where we start the day in politics. Let me know if there's anything else you need me to cover. If so, I'm always here.
I think if you can explain how this redistricting wars thing is going to go, sure, that'd be great. But absent like a prediction of the future. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you, buddy.
All right, thanks.
A decade-long decline in math and reading scores among high school students now appears to have reached an all-time low. Reading and math scores for high school seniors started dropping in 2015 and have now hit their lowest level in more than 20 years. That is according to results released yesterday from an exam known as the Nation's Report Card. For more, let's bring in Dr. Martin West. He is the academic dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. He's also vice chair of the National Assessment Governing Board, which oversees these tests. Good morning, Dr. West. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, a very disheartening picture here. This trend, though, started before 2020, right? So we can't necessarily blame it all on the coronavirus pandemic. What do you think is driving these declining test scores?
That's right. Well, the Nation's Report Card is designed to tell us what's happening to student achievement rather than why. But as you say, it can guide our search for explanations. And we need to be looking back to something that emerged around the middle of the last decade, the 2010s. We need to be looking for something that affects achievement across multiple subjects. We've seen these declines not just in math and reading, but in science, U.S. history, and civics. And we need to be looking for something that's a particular challenge for low-performing students. That's where we've seen the greatest decline among roughly the bottom quarter of students. Meanwhile, students at the top of the achievement distribution are doing just about as well as ever. And so when I try and think about a factor that checks all those boxes, I think really we need to take a hard look at the emergence of smartphones, of social media targeting youth as something that could be a key part of the story.
Indeed, but wouldn't the smartphone technology evolution also be affecting those that are still performing well or traditionally have performed well, or that's just sort of exacerbating this gap?
I think there are reasons to think that it may be a particular challenge for less advantaged students. That's who we see spending the most time on their devices, according to research that looks at that. The technology is also one that, in theory, can be used to enhance the learning process for very motivated students, and that may be what's going on at the top of the distribution.
Interesting. Dr. West, let's talk about what this assessment found. So last year, 32% of high school seniors scored below basic in reading. Now, this means they were not able to find details within a text to help them understand its meaning. That same year, on the math assessment, 45% of high school seniors scored below basic achievement, meaning they don't have foundational math skills. The test found that just 33% of high school seniors were considered academically prepared for college-level math courses. So, Dr. West, with jobs requiring more advanced skills, certainly now, are you concerned about how these students are going to be faring once they actually enter the job market?
Yeah, I'm very concerned. We have good evidence that the knowledge and skills measured by tests like the National Assessment of Educational Progress really matter for student success in post-secondary education, also their success in the labor market. And when we have this decline at the bottom, that's really what is driving up the share of students who are not even meeting that basic level of proficiency in math and reading. You can think about these people as people who lack basic literacy and numeracy skills, and that's going to be a real challenge for them as they try and find their footing in a increasingly challenging work environment.
Right. And we only have a little bit of time left, Dr. West, but is there anything parents or educators can do to help kids get where they need to be academically?
Well, I think we need to look at strategies to get phones under control. I think parents also need to be skeptical of the signals that they're getting about their students' preparation from school systems. We see that despite knowledge and skills declining, the grades are as high or higher than ever. And so parents need to find a way to track their students' progress. And then I think policymakers need to think about a return to school accountability. There's been a lot of backsliding in that area in the policy realm over the past decade that, again, may be contributing to what we're seeing.
Yeah, a problem certainly that has to be corrected. Dr. West, thank you for the time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Coming up next, an old country overhaul. Not going over easy with some scrambled up Cracker Barrel diners. Yes, the puns are just almost too thick there. Across the country, why the popular chain is now flip-flopping on recent restaurant renovations, refocusing on nostalgia over the new. That's next. Well, we are back now with just the latest chapter on the backlash surrounding Cracker Barrel's renovations. After testing out a new design at several locations, the company says it's heard their customers' concerns loud and clear, and they're now scrapping plans to remodel. NBC News correspondent, should I say, senior Cracker Barrel correspondent Marissa Parra, joining us now from Deerfield Beach. I think you've done like at least 4 or 5 stories on the Cracker Barrel controversies.
Definitely.
What is the latest, Marissa? Good morning.
Sam, it feels like just yesterday I was outside of this Cracker Barrel talking about the backlash over the new logo. Well, we are back, and so is the old logo. And the point that's not to be lost here is the whole reason for this shakeup was to bring customers in, right? Because they had declining sales. So one thing that remains to be seen is if listening to customers, their feedback over this logo is going to pay off where it counts.
Cracker Barrel is sticking with its Southern comfort roots, scrapping new design plans and announcing the old country store look is here to stay. Announcing Tuesday it was suspending all remodels after swift online backlash from customers.
To get rid of the interior that brings this entire country together and replace it with this deserves criminal charges.
Cracker Barrel tested a more modern and bright design at 4 of its 660 locations, but quickly found customers preferred nostalgia over a modern new look.
It has become sort of a symbol of this old-time Americana.
It's the latest in the chain's rebranding roller coaster. Swing by Cracker Barrel. After debuting a new logo last month that erased the famed old-timer Uncle Herschel and his overalls next to the iconic barrel and the old country store for a sleeker, simpler look, which didn't land well with fans.
I am not okay. I'm not okay with this.
The backlash prompting Cracker Barrel to release a new statement saying, "You've shared your voices in recent weeks, not just on our logo, but also on our restaurants. If your restaurant hasn't been remodeled, you don't need to worry. It won't be," reassuring their focus will be on the kitchen and on your plate. "We hope that today's step reinforces that we hear you." Just 2 years ago, Cracker Barrel brought in CEO Julie Masino to refresh the brand.
Stop, Cracker Barrel, you're going too far.
But the struggle to lure new customers and keep nostalgia alive is a shared one.
Where do things stand as a whole with the restaurant industry, particularly these longtime chains that have been struggling?
Yeah, I think that a lot of these efforts to sort of revitalize and reignite some of these older brands have been successful. Chili's is Exhibit A, and it's been the biggest success of them all.
Time will tell if Cracker Barrel's receptiveness to customers' opinions will pay off where it matters, on their bottom line.
I think that will ultimately be the lesson to be learned from all of this, which is how to respond when your customers are basically rioting against a decision you've made.
Now, this entire rebrand journey wasn't just about the renovations inside. A lot of it was stuff that you cannot see. And so we're talking about streamlining operations behind the scenes, things that only people who work at Cracker Barrel would see, Sam. But in terms of the things that customers could see, we talked about the logo staying the same, the old country store staying the same. One thing we're not sure about is whether those menu changes, the prices are going to change. Cracker Barrel hasn't yet responded. But in terms of the payoff of this, whether or not this will pay off, I mean, listen, we've been talking about Cracker Barrel more in the last 2 months than we probably did all of last year combined. So the earnings numbers will come out at the end of the month. We will see what changes come as a result of that, Sam.
There's that old adage, Marissa, there's no such thing as bad publicity. But who would have thought that people have such passionate feelings about Cracker Barrel? Well, now we know they really do. Thank you, my friend. More financial headlines for you now. President Trump has a new prescription for all those deceptive pharmaceutical ads. CNBC's Silvana Henao joining us with that and other money news this morning. Hey, Silvana.
Hey, Sam, good morning to you. Yes, so President Trump signing an executive order cracking down on pharmaceutical ads. So it directs the FDA to send enforcement letters to drug makers related to misleading ads. The Department of Health and Human Services is also planning to close a loophole, allowing certain broadcast ads to include an abbreviated description of a drug's side effects. The enforcement effort targets TV ads as well as paid posts by influencers on social media and telehealth advertising. Drug companies spent more than $10 billion on ads last year. Shares of GameStop are set to pop today as the video game retailer reports a jump in quarterly revenue. Now, that was driven by strong sales of hardware like Nintendo's Switch 2 and collectibles as the company shifts towards digital storefronts to fight competition from bigger retailers. GameStop has struck partnerships to sell exclusive versions of games and merchandise, including a collector's edition of Take-Two Interactive's Borderlands 4. And holiday sales are forecast to grow at the slowest pace since the pandemic. A new report from Deloitte says uncertainty over the economy is weighing on consumer spending. Now, the firm says consumers may be front-loading their holiday purchases again, especially as they consider tariffs and other costs associated with inflation. Sales are expected to rise between 2.9 and 3.4% from November through January, and that's compared with a more than 4% increase last year, Sam.
All right, Silvana, thank you so much. Tomorrow marks 24 years since the 9/11 attacks. This morning, we're reflecting on that tragic day with a look at a moving art installation at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, created to honor the memory of those whose lives were lost. WNBC reporter Andrew Siff has the details.
Nearly 3,000 tiles, each one a different shade of blue.
One of those colors is exactly the way that everybody remembers it.
Beth Hillman is president and CEO of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. We're inside the main hall, an exhibit that even today, nearly 24 years after New York's darkest day, tears flow at an exhibit called Remember the Sky. The simple concept, artist Spencer Finch's installation conjuring that powerful blue sky as first responders saved thousands. The project also an echo of those who lost their lives, with a modern way to pay tribute this week.
Take a picture of the sky that day and post it to #RememberTheSky. And the reason that makes sense is because that September 11th in 2001 was a spectacular, beautiful day. The color of the sky is something many people remember that day. And when Spencer Finch decided to make this piece, he created this art with a different color of blue for every person who was killed by terrorists that day.
One of the lives lost, Fire Captain Terry Hatton. That's who retired firefighter Tim Brown is thinking about this anniversary. Brown was on command assignment in the lobby of several World Trade Center buildings, but still thinks about what more he could have done. You went from 7
to 1 to 2.
Did you go up?
If I had heard my best friend, Captain Terry Hatton, yelling Mayday in the radio, I would have gone up. He was my best friend.
Right.
But it was my job to stay in the lobby, and I did not hear him screaming for help.
The Remember the Sky exhibit also contains a famous quote from the poet Virgil.
No day shall erase you from the memory of time.
Each letter on that blue wall forged from the original steel at the World Trade Center.
May we never forget. Our thanks to Andrew Siff for that report. We'll be right back with more news after this.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.